Hi, thanks for joining me. Today, I want to share a message about something that's been swirling around for me, and it's about limitations, freedom, and getting out of our own way when it comes to our creativity. I've had numerous experiences, 3 to be exact, over the past maybe 2 weeks that have really brought home the idea and the importance of removing the limitations that we put on ourselves so that we can experience creative freedom. So let me tell you about these. And my hope is that you will, especially if you're feeling a little restless, you're feeling like you've got some limitations that are showing up for you right now. I'm hoping maybe you find some insight in what I'm going to share. The first experience came a couple of weeks ago when I was interviewing Stephanie Johnson for this channel. And that episode will be coming out soon. I'm really excited to share it. But you might know Stephanie. She is an ICM, or intentional camera movement photographer. But she's really, over the past few years, taken that medium, taking that approach and really expanded it and played with it, and has really taken her photography to very different places recently. And as we were having our conversation, one of the themes that came up over and over again was about limitations and how we limit ourselves when we have a fixed idea of what kind of photographer we are or what kind of photography that we're doing. One example of these limitations is around how we make our images. For instance, both Stephanie and I have an affinity for making any special effects that we want in our photos to be done in camera. So in my case, that means that if I want something to have a dreamy or blurry or otherworldly kind of look, I'm going to use a lens baby because that allows me to take the photo with that effect, as opposed to taking the photo straight and then pulling it into Photoshop or another editing software and applying filters or Gaussian blurs or anything like that. So I like to use the specialty lens to achieve that effect. Stephanie and I share a love of doing multiple exposures in camera, as opposed to taking separate photos and pulling them into Photoshop and making layers and whatnot. And she was talking about how she started feeling like that was limiting her creativity. So she started pulling her images into Photoshop and just playing with layers, playing with different filters, playing with different modes of blending. And the results that she's getting are such a departure from what she was doing even 2 years ago. It's still clearly her work, which I'll talk about in a few minutes when it comes to our voice in our art. But she's really expanded how she's seeing herself as an artist. It's not just about the photography. It's about what can she do with her art and how can she take advantage of all of the tools at her disposal. And when we were having that conversation, I was realizing how much I am attached to doing certain things in camera or not doing certain things. And I think that it is, I kind of trace it back to a little bit of, well, not even a little bit, a lot of resistance to AI. I love the AI tools that help us to do better editing, to do, better cloning and object removal and whatnot. But at this point, I'm not really interested in the more generative AI aspects that are replacing things or completely changing a photo or creating a photo almost from scratch. And so I'm kind of still attached to my in-camera effects. And talking to Stephanie, I really felt like I was hearing this invitation. And the way she and I talked about it was giving ourselves permission to play, to stretch, to try something different and see how it works, and to kind of let go of our attachments to having our photography happen in a particular way. The second lesson or experience came just last week when I made a day trip to Chicago, and I had the good fortune of getting into the exhibit, My New Yorks, which is an exhibition of architectural paintings of Georgia O'Keeffe alongside her more traditional nature-based paintings. And it was really fascinating to see the juxtaposition of those two different genres or subject matter. Of course, we all know Georgia O'Keeffe for her very provocative and gorgeous flower paintings, as well as her desert Southwest images, whether that's bones or adobe houses or that's, the hills of the Southwest. Um, and so to see the contrast with her architecture paintings was really very interesting. And a lot of people didn't even know that she did architectural paintings. But once you see them, you can tell that it's Georgia O'Keeffe. If you'd seen them in isolation and you didn't know, you might not have guessed it. But once you see the body of work that she has, you can really see it. And what I found interesting and where some of the lessons came in during this exhibit, besides just looking at the paintings all together, was reading some of the commentary that the curators had prepared, and much of it was put on the walls of the exhibit. And I wanted to share a couple of those pieces of commentary that have to do with challenging the limitations that we put on ourselves. Here's one of the quotes that stood out to me. "I'm always swinging from one thing to the other. I have always been very free in my approach. I see no reason why abstract and realistic art can't live side by side. The principles are the same." And she said this in 1965. There was another piece of wisdom that was part of curator's commentary that I also want to share that elaborates a little bit on this idea. It said, "During her career, O'Keeffe moved fluidly between abstraction and representation, never limiting her approach to one kind of aesthetic exploration at any given time. Whether communicating aspects of her lived experiences on canvas or on paper, the artist continually calibrated and reinvented her vocabulary with each composition." Now, really, that says it all. There's almost no more commentary needed, except that I really want to pull out the thread of talking about calibrating and reinventing her vocabulary, because it got me thinking about this pull that we sometimes feel to be a specialist in one particular type of photography or one particular subject, whether that's portraits or street photography, nature, architecture, that sort of thing. And there are absolutely benefits to us, kind of picking a lane and deciding to really dig in and be the best we can be in that. And if your passion pulls you towards that, then go for it. And if the market is pulling you towards that and that aligns with your passion, then, please, use that lane. This is a yes and, just like I talked about in the previous solo video. The yes and is yes. If you find yourself pulled to that particular subject, then go ahead and do that. And think about not just what's your particular genre of photography, but what is your vocabulary? And how much are you allowing yourself to recalibrate and reinvent as you go, as you evolve as an artist? So if I were to think of myself, instead of saying, I photograph nature and architecture, those are those two, subject matter genre focuses that, or is it foci? Focuses that that one could fairly say that I photograph. But if I look at it as my vocabulary, that speaks more to who I am as an artist and what my voice is. So when I think of my vocabulary, I think of abstraction, sometimes minimalism, curves, unexpected perspectives. I'm sure if I kept thinking about it, kept studying my images, I would get clearer on the full breadth of my vocabulary. But what that does, just even that start of saying things like abstract, minimalist, curves, unexpected perspectives, that means that no matter what I'm pointing my camera at, that's the lens that I'm looking through. And it doesn't matter if it's a building or a person or a flower or a street scene. If I'm thinking, how do I use my vocabulary to speak this photograph in a way that is reflective of me, that is minimalist or abstract or takes advantage of curves and lines or really gives us that unexpected perspective. That's when I'm using my vocabulary. And you can see that, by using and by understanding and using your vocabulary, you're opening yourself up to being able to photograph anything that catches your eye, or as we'll learn in the interview that I do with John Barclay, what takes you. What takes you. You won't feel like you can only be taken by certain things because that's the expectation. Your vocabulary is much more expansive than maybe you thought before. So again, it's that theme of removing the limitations that maybe we've put on ourselves or that we've allowed others to put on us, and finding out what is the vocabulary and the voice that will free me up to express myself in the way that only I can, but allow me also to capture anything that draws my attention. The third experience came this past weekend when I attended a shamanic workshop. The facilitator is hosting a series of workshops over a period of months, and each one focuses on a different element, whether that's air, fire, water, or earth. And this past weekend happened to be fire. One of the reasons I was attracted to it is because I have felt like my fire, like that spark, has been very dim over the past 6 months to a year. It occasionally will flare up, but by and large, I have felt like that fire has been missing. So I went into it with the question, what can I do to find my fire? Over the course of the day, we did a series of reflective activities and exercises. And it was during maybe the final one that it dawned on me that the fire is actually still alive. It's still in me. There's at least a spark. What's getting in the way is not trying to find it, and particularly trying to find it out there somewhere. What's getting in the way is me putting out that fire. And that's kind of hard to admit, that I am, sort of engaging sometimes in a little bit of self-sabotage, which sounds a little bit dramatic, but it's basically just another way of saying I'm getting in my own way. I'm shutting down that fire, consciously and unconsciously. And it's there. I just have to stop putting it out. And there are different ways that I've been putting it out, that we put out our own fire. It might be that we become overly concerned with what people on social media are going to think about our images, or anybody else is going to think about our images. It might be that we've limited our vision in some way. We've become attached to a particular approach, particular subject, and we've not given ourselves that permission to be more expansive. So we've kind of blocked the creativity. The shutting down could take the form of second guessing our instincts, our intuition, and that leads to inaction. It leads to us shutting ourselves down proactively and not even sharing what we have. So that second guessing can lead to analysis paralysis, and that certainly keeps us stuck. We also get in our way when we decide not to prioritize our creativity and our creative time. Often, at least in my case, I find myself doing that because I'm afraid of disappointing someone else. Because if I'm putting a priority on that creativity, that likely means I'm saying no to something, some activity, some outing, some opportunity. And it's hard to disappoint someone. But the truth is, if I'm saying yes to myself, I'm taking care of myself. You are taking care of yourself. And when you're doing that, you're going to show up as a better person. And so when you do say yes, you're going to feel more whole. You're not going to feel resentful because you've deprioritized something that is really important to you. So those are all ways that we can put out our own fire. And it's important to recognize where am I doing that? Where am I standing in my own light and getting in my own way and snuffing out that spark? And what would it mean if I found the way to fan the flames? One of the things we noticed, we had a fire that was burning, this small, not quite a bonfire, but just a little pit fire. And it was starting to go out. And one of the gentlemen just started fanning it with paper. And of course, we all know, like, fire needs air, it needs oxygen, it needs nudging, it needs something that's going to keep it going. So you can't expect your fire to keep going if you don't fan those flames, if you don't give it room to breathe and give it the oxygen that it needs to really, flare up as big as it can. So if any of these lessons that I've shared with you, whether that is the conversation I had with Stephanie, the words and wisdom of Georgia O'Keeffe, or this idea of the spark and the fire and how do we keep that alive, if any of those have resonated with you, I hope that you will take a moment sometime in the near future to do some reflection, to think about where are you getting in your own way and what do you want to do about it? What are you committed to doing to remove any of those barriers? Of course, you can step back and think about, why did I put those barriers there in the first place? Because if we trace all it back, often it's some sort of fear. And this is me putting my coach hat on. When we experience fear, it's not something to try to stuff away or avoid or, power through without any reflection. Fear that we have, especially when it comes to our creative selves, is often because we're trying to protect ourselves. There's something in us that's saying, don't put yourself out there. Don't let that fire get too bright because you could get hurt. So think about where that's coming from for you, if that indeed is something that you're experiencing. Trust me, it's worth the time and effort and energy to do that self-reflection, because sometimes just even that simple awareness is enough to, uncork the bottle and let the genie out and really open up things for you. I'd like to close with some more words from Georgia O'Keeffe that were at the exhibit, and they really fit perfectly for today in this social media age, even though they were said, some 70 years ago. She said, I have always been willing to bet on myself, and been willing to stand on what I am and can do, even when the world isn't much with me. That's such a lovely invitation to trust yourself and be strong in yourself. And just trust who you are as an artist. So I hope what I've shared here has had some meaning or usefulness to you. I hope maybe it now or later spurs some sort of insight that supports you in being a stronger artist, a more visionary and expressive photographer. If you did find some value in this, I would love it if you liked the video, shared it with anyone that you think might love to hear this message. Please do subscribe if you haven't yet. And I would love to hear from you in the comments about what did resonate with you and what are you committed to doing to move through any limitations that you might have imposed on yourself. And as always, I want to extend a huge thank you to the nature photography classes and their Inspired Creator Grant, which makes this channel possible. I'm so grateful for their support. If you want to learn more about it or even submit your own application, visit naturephotographyclasses.com/inspired-creator. And I've put that link down in the description. Thanks so much for spending time with me. I hope you'll check out some of the other interview videos that I've done, posted on the channel. There's a lot more to come in the coming months, and I'm so excited to share it with you. So have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next time.